The rain came down in sheets that night, cold and merciless, drumming against the cracked pavement like a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. The city's streetlights flickered weakly, casting a dull orange glow on the soaked sidewalks as Mia pulled the thin, frayed blanket tighter around her daughter. Her little girl's tiny hand gripped her shirt as if it were the only safe thing left in the world. In many ways, it was. Mia had never imagined her life would come to this, sleeping under a bridge, counting every coin like it could buy them a future, pretending the hunger in her stomach was just a passing feeling. Just a year ago, she had a job, a small apartment, a future mapped out in careful dreams. But life had a way of tearing even the strongest plans apart. A layoff, unpaid bills, and a broken relationship had left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the weight of being a mother with no home to return to. The sound of distant traffic echoed through the night, but it wasn't the cars that haunted her most, it was the memories. Memories of warm dinners, laughter in small kitchens, and a boy with kind eyes who used to promise her forever. She hadn't thought about him in years. Not really. Life had been too heavy, too fast, too cruel. But sometimes, in the quietest hours, his face would appear in her mind like a half-forgotten photograph. Mia tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear and glanced at her daughter, Lily. The little girl's cheeks were flushed from the cold, her breath visible in small puffs of air. It was then that Mia made a quiet promise to herself. This wasn't going to be the end of their story. She was going to fight, even if she had nothing left to give. Sparkles, speech balloon. If you believe in second chances, in kindness that changes lives, and in love that finds its way back, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stars of Kindness. Every small act helps us spread hope. Sparkles. The next morning, gray light filtered through the overcast sky as she walked with Lily through the busy streets, their shoes soaked and thin from overuse. A small sign at the end of the block caught her eye, a flyer taped to a lamppost with the words, "Soup Kitchen, hot meals served daily." She hesitated for a moment. Pride was a fragile thing, and she had clung to hers for far too long. But her daughter's tired eyes told her the truth, they needed help. When Mia stepped inside the soup kitchen, the warm air felt almost unreal. The smell of fresh bread and hot soup wrapped around her like a gentle embrace. People were seated at long wooden tables, some alone, some in small groups, eating slowly, their faces reflecting every shade of exhaustion and gratitude. Volunteers moved between tables with trays and gentle smiles, serving food without judgment. She held Lily close as they took a seat near the corner, away from the crowd. A woman with a kind face brought them 2 bowls of soup and 2 slices of bread. For the first time in weeks, Mia felt her chest loosen. She watched her daughter dip the bread into the soup, her small hands trembling slightly, and tears burned the back of Mia's throat. It was just soup. But to them, it felt like hope. She didn't notice him at first. Her mind was too consumed with the warmth of the food, the sound of rain against the windows, the feeling of being unseen in a crowded room. But then, across the room, her eyes caught a familiar profile. A man stood near the kitchen doors, speaking quietly to one of the volunteers. His hair was darker now, more mature, and his posture carried the weight of someone who had seen the world. But those eyes. She could never forget those eyes. Her heart thudded against her ribs as recognition hit her like a tidal wave. Ethan Carter. Her first love. The boy who once walked her home after school every single day, who whispered promises under the stars, who made her believe in forever before life tore them apart. She had lost touch with him after graduation, and their lives had spun in different directions. Now, years later, there he was, standing just a few feet away, while she sat in a corner with a child on her lap, wearing a coat with holes in the sleeves. Mia lowered her gaze, her pulse racing. She prayed he wouldn't see her like this, not broken, not homeless, not like a shadow of the girl she once was. She wasn't ready for the questions, the pity, the look in his eyes if he recognized her. She wanted to vanish into the floor. Ethan scanned the room slowly, and for a brief moment, his eyes swept over her table. But he didn't pause. He didn't recognize her. Mia let out a shaky breath she didn't know she was holding. She convinced herself it was better this way. Better to let the past stay buried. But what she didn't know was that Ethan wasn't just visiting the soup kitchen. He was the reason it existed. Years ago, after losing someone he loved to the harshness of life on the streets, Ethan had vowed to create something that offered warmth where the world gave cold. He funded the kitchen quietly, never seeking recognition, just making sure it stayed open. Every bowl of soup, every piece of bread, every volunteer, it was all a piece of his silent promise. And now, unknowingly, the woman he once loved more than anything sat beneath that roof, wrapped in the safety he had built for strangers. As the afternoon stretched on, Mia finished their meal slowly, not wanting to step back into the rain. She watched Ethan speak with a volunteer, his face calm and focused, a soft smile appearing when someone thanked him. He looked happy. Stable. Like someone who had found his place in the world. A part of her ached quietly, not from jealousy, but from the stark contrast between their lives. She had once imagined a future where they were together, building a life side by side. But life had taken that dream and scattered it like dust in the wind. She tucked Lily's hair behind her ear and whispered softly, "One day, baby. One day it'll be better." The days that followed carried a strange rhythm. Mia began coming to the soup kitchen daily. It became a small sanctuary, a place where Lily could eat without fear, where she could warm her frozen fingers, where she didn't have to feel invisible. And every day, Ethan was there. Talking to volunteers. Laughing quietly with children. Standing like a quiet pillar in a space built on kindness. He still didn't recognize her. And she made sure of it, keeping her head down, sitting at the farthest corner, always slipping out quietly before he could get too close. She told herself it didn't matter. He was from her past, and the past didn't belong in the struggle she lived now. But one evening, everything shifted. The rain had been relentless that day. Lily had caught a cold, her small body shivering despite the blanket Mia had wrapped around her. When they entered the soup kitchen, one of the volunteers immediately brought a cup of warm tea and a soft smile. But as Lily coughed, Mia's heart clenched. She knew she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. They needed more than soup. They needed shelter. She walked toward the front desk nervously, asking in a hushed voice if there were any shelters nearby. The volunteer nodded kindly and began to explain the options. And just as Mia lowered her head to thank her, Ethan walked past, his voice warm as he greeted the staff. For the first time, Mia was close enough to hear him. That same voice she remembered, deeper now, steadier, still carrying that quiet strength that had once made her feel safe. Her heart trembled. She turned away quickly, clutching Lily's hand, but it was too late. He glanced up. And this time, his eyes lingered. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, confusion, recognition buried beneath years of time. Mia froze, her breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to shrink around them, the sound of rain fading into a soft, distant hum. She lowered her gaze, praying he would look away. But Ethan took a step forward. And in that moment, Mia knew. She could no longer stay invisible. For a heartbeat, Mia couldn't move. It was as if the whole room held its breath. The clinking of dishes, the murmur of quiet conversations, the soft patter of rain outside, all of it faded to a distant echo. She stared at the floor, her hand tightening around Lily's as if the little girl's warmth was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Ethan stood a few steps away, his brow furrowed slightly, trying to place the face before him. Years had changed them both. She wasn't the girl with the bright eyes and dreams bigger than the sky anymore. Life had carved new lines on her face, shadows beneath her eyes, and a kind of quiet resilience only those who had suffered could carry. She wasn't the Mia he used to know. But love, the kind that once burned quietly but deeply, has a way of recognizing what the years can't erase. And in that silent moment, something clicked. Ethan's eyes widened, and his lips parted just slightly, as if a name was forming before he even realized it. Mia, he whispered under his breath. Her body stiffened at the sound, her throat tightening. She didn't want to hear her name like that, not with surprise, not with pity. She turned quickly, clutching Lily's hand, but before she could step away, his voice came again. It was soft, but steady. Mia, is that you? She froze. Not because she wanted to answer. But because she hadn't heard anyone say her name with that kind of warmth in a very long time. The volunteer at the counter looked from one to the other, sensing something unspoken. Ethan took a slow step forward, careful not to startle her, his eyes searching her face for the girl he remembered. And even beneath the exhaustion, the hardship, and the weight of lost years, he saw her. The same Mia who used to laugh beneath summer skies. The same Mia who once believed love could conquer anything. Mia swallowed hard, forcing her gaze up. Their eyes met, and time folded in on itself. The years between them vanished like fog in sunlight. But instead of joy, she felt a wave of shame. She wanted to shrink into the floor. He was dressed in a crisp gray coat, clean and steady, like a man who had built a life. And she was standing there in damp, threadbare clothes with a sick child at her side. She managed a quiet, fragile smile, the kind that hides more pain than it shows. "Hi," she murmured. It was barely a whisper, but it was enough. Ethan's chest tightened. So many questions swirled inside him, but all he saw in front of him was someone who had once mattered more than anything. He didn't care about the rain on her jacket or the way her hair stuck to her cheeks. He cared that she was here, and she looked like someone the world had been far too cruel to. He knelt slightly to Lily's level, his voice gentle. "Hi, sweetheart," he said softly. Lily blinked up at him, unsure, clutching her mother's hand tighter. Ethan smiled faintly. "You must be her world," he whispered more to himself than to anyone else. And he wasn't wrong. Mia held Lily close. She didn't want him to ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. But Ethan didn't push. He simply straightened and nodded toward an empty table near the window. "Can we talk?" he asked gently. For a long moment, Mia hesitated. The instinct to run was strong. To keep her pain hidden where no one could see it. But another part of her, the part that remembered who they used to be, whispered softly that maybe, just this once, she didn't have to carry it alone. She followed him to the table, Lily sitting quietly beside her, eating the last piece of bread. Rain streaked down the window beside them, blurring the world outside into gray shapes. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice soft but steady. "Mia, what happened?" The question cut through her like a blade. Not because it was cruel, but because it was kind. Kindness had a way of making walls crack. And Mia had built hers high. She took a shaky breath. "Life happened," she whispered. Ethan didn't interrupt. He let her speak in her own rhythm. Words spilled from her like water from a dam that had been holding too much for too long. She told him about losing her job when the company shut down. About the rent she couldn't pay, the partner who walked away when things got hard, the nights sleeping on buses, and the endless search for a shelter that had space. She didn't cry, not because she didn't want to, but because she had run out of tears long ago. Ethan listened, every word carving deeper into his heart. This was the girl he once swore he'd protect from everything. And now, she had fought this war alone. When she finished, the silence that followed was heavy. Not awkward, just full. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He didn't say, "Why didn't you call me?" Or, "Why didn't you find me?" He knew life doesn't work like that. Instead, he took a breath and said something she didn't expect. "I'm sorry you went through this. You didn't deserve it." Those words undid something inside her. For years, Mia had blamed herself for everything, for failing to keep her life together, for not being strong enough, for ending up here. But hearing those words from someone who once loved her felt like a light breaking through a crack in the dark. She looked at him with wide eyes. "Ethan, you don't have to." He shook his head gently. "I know I don't. But I want to." Mia glanced down at Lily, who was now leaning sleepily against her side. Something in Ethan's eyes told her this wasn't pity. It was care. Real, quiet, steady care. The kind she hadn't felt in years. The days that followed began to change in quiet, steady ways. Ethan didn't make grand gestures or loud promises. Instead, he showed up. He arranged for Mia and Lily to have a safe place to stay in a women's shelter he personally supported. He made sure Lily saw a doctor and got medicine for her cold. He found Mia a warm coat, new shoes, and groceries, never making her feel small for needing them. At first, Mia resisted. She wasn't used to accepting help. But slowly, something inside her softened. It wasn't just the material things he gave. It was the way he saw her, not as a homeless woman, not as someone broken, but as Mia. The girl he once loved. The woman who had survived more than most. She started volunteering at the soup kitchen during the day. Washing dishes, serving meals, sweeping floors. It wasn't much, but it gave her a sense of purpose. She wanted to give back to the place that had held her in her lowest moment. And Ethan was there every day. Sometimes talking with her quietly in corners, sometimes helping children paint at the tables, sometimes just watching Lily laugh for the first time in a long while. There were moments when Mia would catch him looking at her the way he used to all those years ago. And she'd look away, not because she didn't feel it, but because she wasn't sure she deserved to. Ethan never told her that the soup kitchen was his. Not yet. He didn't want her gratitude. He wanted her trust. But deep down, he also knew something else. He hadn't stopped loving her. Not really. The years had changed them, shaped them, scarred them. But the thread between them had never fully broken. One night, as they stood outside the shelter beneath a soft drizzle, Ethan offered her an umbrella. She took it slowly, their fingers brushing for just a second, and that second stretched like forever. She whispered a quiet, "Thank you," and he answered with a smile that carried years of things left unsaid. The first snow of the season arrived like a quiet blanket, soft and pure, covering the city in fragile white. The streets were calmer that evening, the air sharper, and the sky glowed a pale silver under the dim streetlights. Mia stood at the window of the shelter, watching the snowflakes drift down like tiny whispers. Lily slept soundly in the cot behind her, wrapped in a warm blanket with a soft toy one of the volunteers had gifted her. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt something she almost didn't recognize. Safety. It wasn't just the roof above their heads or the warm food. It was the feeling of being seen. Not invisible. Not forgotten. Seen. And more than that, it was Ethan. The past few weeks had unfolded in ways she hadn't expected. Ethan had slowly, carefully, become a part of their days again. Whether it was showing up with hot chocolate on cold mornings, teaching Lily to build a snowman in the yard of the soup kitchen, or simply sitting beside Mia as they closed up for the night, he was there. Not demanding, not prying. Just there. Steady as a heartbeat. But something inside Mia wrestled quietly. Gratitude and guilt. Warmth and fear. Because love, especially the kind that once burned deep, wasn't something she trusted easily anymore. Life had taught her that everything beautiful could be ripped away in a single moment. Ethan, however, was carrying a truth she didn't yet know. One evening, just a week before Christmas, the soup kitchen was decorated with garlands and strings of tiny golden lights. The scent of cinnamon and warm bread filled the air. Volunteers served special holiday meals to families who had nowhere else to go. Laughter and chatter filled the space, soft, fragile, but real. Mia moved between tables with trays, her hair tied loosely back, her cheeks flushed from the warmth of the kitchen. She felt lighter these days. Not whole yet, but no longer shattered. She glanced toward the corner where Ethan was talking with one of the coordinators, papers in hand. He was smiling faintly, but there was something in his eyes tonight, a quiet weight. Later that night, after the guests had left and the volunteers had begun to clean up, Ethan approached her near the doorway. His breath clouded slightly in the cold air as the two of them stepped outside into the falling snow. The street was almost empty, the world muffled in soft white silence. "Mia," he began, his voice calm but carrying a softness that made her heart tighten. She looked up at him, the light from the lampposts catching the snow in her hair. "Yeah," she whispered. He hesitated for a moment. Then, with a quiet exhale, he said, "There's something I need to tell you." Her stomach fluttered nervously. She nodded. "You remember when you first came to the soup kitchen," he said slowly. "You probably thought I was just another volunteer, someone passing through." She frowned slightly, confused. "But that's not the truth," Ethan continued, his eyes steady on hers. "I built this place, Mia. I funded it. Every bowl of soup, every bed in the shelter, every light that stays on, it's because of something I started a few years ago. I wanted to help people who were going through the kind of pain I once saw and couldn't stop." Mia's breath caught. "You funded it," she whispered. He nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. "After my dad died, I used the inheritance to do something that mattered. I didn't want to just write checks to causes I didn't understand. So, I built this. A place for people to land when the world takes everything from them." He paused. "I never thought the person I'd end up helping would be you." The world tilted slightly beneath her feet. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from something heavier, something that burned behind her ribs. She stared at him, snow falling softly between them. Her voice trembled. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan took a step closer. "Because I didn't want you to think this was about pity. Or charity. I wanted you to know I was here because I care. Not because I felt sorry for you. Not because I wanted anything in return. Just because it's you, Mia." For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her throat burned. All those days, all those nights, she had walked into this place believing it was a stranger's kindness that kept her alive. And now she stood before the boy she once loved, the man who had quietly carried her through the hardest winter of her life. Her hands trembled slightly. Ethan, I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything, he said softly. I just needed you to know. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything they hadn't said for years. And then Lily's voice cut through the cold air. Mama. Mia turned to see her little girl at the doorway of the kitchen, bundled in her oversized pink coat, blinking sleepily. Ethan smiled softly and walked toward her, kneeling down in the snow. Hey, sweetheart, he said gently. Lily smiled shyly, then threw her little arms around his neck. And in that moment, something inside Mia cracked open. It wasn't about grand declarations or dramatic confessions. It was about safety. About trust. About love that came quietly and stayed. She walked toward them slowly, her breath visible in the cold, and when she stood beside Ethan, she whispered, "Thank you." But in that single word, she poured everything she couldn't say, the pain, the gratitude, the love that had been waiting in silence all these years. In the weeks that followed, life began to rebuild itself, slowly, like the steady rising of the sun after a long night. Mia found work at the soup kitchen, eventually taking on a paid position helping to coordinate the shelter's programs. Lily started preschool, her laughter filling the halls each morning like sunlight. Ethan never tried to rush anything between them. He simply stayed. Brought warm coffee on early mornings. Read Lily bedtime stories when Mia was too tired to keep her eyes open. Walked beside her, never in front, never behind. Just beside. And one evening, under the same bridge where she had once held Lily in the cold, they stood together, only this time, they weren't broken. They were building. Mia turned to him, tears stinging her eyes, and whispered, I thought I was invisible. He touched her hand gently. You were never invisible to me. She didn't need anything else after that. Sparkles, speech balloon. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stars of Kindness. Your support helps bring more stories of second chances, real love, and the quiet power of kindness into the world. Sparkling Heart.